little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. Yeah. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Yahusha Messiah, the righteous one. He is the propitiation for our sins, not for ours only, but for the sins of the whole world. And by this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments, if we keep his commandments. Okay. Talk like, love like, live like. Okay. Talk like, love like, live like. The one who says, I have come to know him, and does not keep his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, truly in him, the love of God is perfected. By this we know that we are in him. And by this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments, if we keep his commandments. The one who says he resides in him ought to walk just as that one walked, ought to walk just as that one walked. By this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. Walk like him, talk like him, love like him, live like him. We have an advocate with the Father, Yahusha Messiah, the righteous one. And by this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments, if we keep his commandments. Walk like, talk like, love like, live like. Walk like him, talk like him, talk like him, love like him, live like him.
All right, still getting used to all the controls. Sorry for that delay. Hello and welcome to Remnant Radio Ministries. This is Saul DePaul. Today is Sunday, June 29th. Want to say a special shout out to Wes Plays Jones and Dahlia. And, Wes has had this amazing channel in music ministry for some time now. So just wanted to thank him for allowing me to share some of his music and Dahlia's music from that mixtape, Yah Tunes. Really phenomenal stuff. Okay, so today's the day after my video from yesterday where we had the big reveal. And what I wanted to do, see if I can find it. There we go. Going back into the right screen here. It's always fun with technical issues. I'll go ahead and exit the full screen mode and jump into my article. So what I've done this morning, since last night's video and the big reveal of what the thing was that drew me to the truth and drew me closer to the Father and the Son and into the Word. And that, of course, is that the world that we live in is not what we've been told. So I covered a lot of that yesterday, and I did promise today to get into this. Some of the videos, I think, is something I wanted to do today, but also I mentioned the app. So if you go to my Substack, and I'll update the post as well on remnantradio.com, you'll see the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. That's the name of the app. And there's a link here that you can just follow, which will take you straight to the app. I can't remember exactly what the charge is. It's probably around 299, and that gives you access to everything that the app has. And then from there, you can choose to donate if you'd like to. You don't have to. But there are numerous videos in here. So what I suggest is take the 30-day challenge. Watch one video a day for 30 days. And at the end of that period, if you're still not certain, okay, that's fine. But if you're not questioning the actual model and what we've been told, then well, yeah, I guess you're a rare person and you're probably stuck in kind of the heliocentric model, which most people are anyway. So no harm, no foul. You can go back to Life in the Matrix. Um, what I did want to point out is the question mark on this menu. You'll see that right here. And that'll take you to a variety of very common questions that people have as soon as they're faced with this concept. They'll say things like, where's the edge? Why don't people fall off? Why don't ships fall off the edge of the earth? Where does the sun go? What is under the earth if it's flat? Can we dig down there and see? What happens to ships that go over the horizon? I think we'll have a video that covers that today. Photos of Earth from space. We're going to look at a video from that today as well. Why are other planets round? This is a very common one. It's kind of like an interesting statement, like if my ceiling has round lights, does my floor have to be round? Kind of a silly point there, but it does make some sense to a degree. But well, there's so many common questions here. We talked yesterday about satellites, a little bit about Antarctica. Circumnavigation is covered there. Circumnavigation, and I've done flights around the world, leaving from California and going through Europe and then jumping into the Middle East or India and then into Asia and then back to California. So clearly going around the world, but in a sense, there's two models. There's around the world on a sphere and there's around the world on a globe. Sorry, around the world on a globe or around the world in a what we're calling the biblical cosmological system, which is really just doing either an east or a westerly direction in a very large circle. And what happens as you adjust your longitude and your latitude and your coordinates as you're traveling in an easterly direction, you're always going to have north pointing to the right of you. And let me see, if we're traveling to the west, you would be having north to the right of you. If you're traveling to the east, you'd have north to the left of you. And you might make slight adjustments as you're moving through that space. We're gonna, I believe, look at a flight that's in the southern part of um, the model, if you will, and those flights are going to help us question, what we're told. So you'll see a bunch of other questions in here. Let's see if there's any that jump out at me. Um, yeah, rotations in different locations, Southern Star and Moon. The seasons is a huge one. If you kind of listen to what the heliocentric model tells you, we are 93 million miles away from the sun on average, but we're actually in an elliptical orbit that gets closer to the sun and further from the sun, depending on what part of the year. Now, here in the north, we're actually told that we are 3 million miles closer to, sorry, 3 million miles further from the sun during our summer. And that actually makes no sense. And what we're told is the tilt of the Earth is what makes the sunlight heat up the Earth, and it's not the distance from the sun. So that's very counterintuitive and something that you'll be able to cover in a lot of detail in that video. Obviously, gravity, Coriolis comes up a lot. You'll find that there are um, questions about sharpshooters and do they adjust for Coriolis? Of course they don't. They're in war. They're probably, just trying to aim at the target. There's no Coriolis effect that we can measure. We talked about seeing too far. You can get into some of the religious things in that particular clip. Um, are all the space agencies in on it? What about pilots and scientists? Well, there probably are some pilots and scientists that are pretty awake, actually. And there's a number of interviews of pilots swear that the Earth is a flat and stationary level plane. And you can watch some of those videos, especially getting into fighter pilots and how they look out across many miles of territory to find the enemy. They're never adjusting for curvature. So that's something that you can deep dive a little bit further. Clearly, not everyone is in on it, but all the space agencies, if they're showing themselves going to the moon, they are in on it at some level within the hierarchy. They're aware of what they're doing. So there is definitely a deception that is clearly happening if we are not on a round spinning globe, because that's what all the space agencies have told us. We can talk about tides. Um, Tides are kind of interesting because my understanding is that the salt water does move up and down based on the tides, but the fresh water does not. My theory around that is that the salt has something to do with the electromagnetic effects of the sun and the moon that are rotating around above our system. Um, why the lie is always the big question people ask if they just kind of throw up their hands and say, okay, I can't prove or disprove what you're saying, and you're exhausting me. Why the lie? And that's, a very common response. So go through that playlist. Eclipses are addressed. Moving down to the lower photo here, we have moon phases, um, the pendulum, meteors and asteroids, the sticks and shadows test, stars, star trails. The ISS obviously is giving us a broadcast of something that it claims to be moving above the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour. And there's a lot of reasons why that can't be. And we will show you some of those in that playlist. Lots of maps conversation. If you go back and look at ancient maps, histories of maps, and some of the older maps examples, you'll see some things that would probably surprise you. Time zones. When you look at, if you look at the model closely here, you kind of see how I was saying yesterday that the Earth system is, along with all the celestial bodies that were made on, one of those days of creation back in Genesis 1, um, is that it's a giant clock that tells perfect time. And you can sort of see that here. It's actually beautifully made watch, if you will. The sun is actually where it's noon. So every time the sun is moving around that system in that big circle, you'll see that it's noon at that point. And in fact, the moon is going to be out of phase with the sun. Sometimes they're directly in phase, sometimes out of phase. And as the moon gets to the very opposite side of this system, it becomes a full moon, and you're going to see it, very bright. If you go into First Enoch, it talks a lot about how this clock is made and how those different portions of light are allocated between them and among them, I should say. And so my theory around tides again is that these two bodies are actually electrically either positive or negatively charged. Maybe the sunlight is a generating light and the moonlight is a negatively charged light, a septic light. And the two of them together kind of create this electromagnetic field effect that goes through the atmosphere or the ether, which could potentially drive free energy. This is something that I think Nikola Tesla knew a thing or two about. And what you'll notice too is that the inner circle is the Tropic of Cancer, the outer circle is the Tropic of Capricorn. Depending on where you are on this Earth plane, you're gonna feel warmth because the sun is actually close and local. And some of the more recent data that I've seen indicates from very good scientific math and reasoning and analytic data is that the sun and the moon are probably about 3,000 miles up, maybe a little more, and that the sun and the moon are approximately 30 miles in diameter, and they're equal in size approximately, from what we can tell. But we're down here, so we don't know all of that. Um, so we talked a bit about maps and about time, and there's a couple other points in here. I think rainbows is an interesting one. In the model where the earth is basically under this dome like structure, which we call a firmament or heaven, um, in terms of what's in scripture. You can imagine that the dome probably comes down like a structure, like a superdome. The structure probably lands around the Antarctic shoreline, but inland a ways in the outer parts of it. And you can sort of imagine that the dome height changes depending on where you are in terms of the longitude. So at the North Pole is probably the highest part of that dome structure, and at the South pole, which is really just a giant circle, it's really likely to be low. And I've seen a video before of an Encyclopedia Britannica from 1958, I believe. And there was someone who had a copy, a physical copy, opened it up to Antarctica, and was able to show that the actual prose in the encyclopedia said that at the um, 80th degree longitude, the height was 13,000 feet elevation of a firmament. So that was actually in the encyclopedia from 1958. So a lot of interesting things there. What I want to do today is actually get into some cool videos, and we'll talk through some of these as we go. And so let's start with the first one. What about sunsets? So let's see how this share works. I'm going to go ahead and click it. All right, so that's one of the videos we have to look at. And for me, there's a couple videos I've seen of sunsets. I've obviously seen them where they appear to set beyond the horizon and go down below a curve of Earth. In that video, clearly that's not the case. I think it depends a little bit on the atmospheric effect and the height. That one actually looked like a lower height video. I've seen one where Dave Weiss actually flew a drone up to about a 200 or 300 foot elevation on a very clear day and took a video of the sunset, and it really just kind of became small, and then it sort of disappeared. It kind of turned into like a vapor and just kind of disappeared. It never set. So that's one interesting way to look at where we live. Here's a video about ships going over the horizon. Let's take a look at that one.
Make existing content relevant for any market
And of
while
course
staying
we have ads in here. So I'm gonna just I don't have the premium version. We'll just have to deal with
on
it.
brand with Adobe Express.
Okay, so that's our next video there. And what you might notice from that one clearly is that you can play around a little bit, and you can run this experiment yourself with a Nikon P900 camera or other high quality zoom lens cameras, where you can go to any kind of flat surface area like a beach and watch things that go further away, or things that aren't visible. You can bring them into the realm of visibility using the aperture. So because our eyes only have a certain angular momentum resolution, we can only see so far, and things that disappear typically disappear because we can't zoom in with our eyes. Whereas with the optics of today, we can now look very closely at things that are moving away or things that have disappeared and bring them right back into view. Now, this disproves any kind of curvature. We can talk about whether refraction's at play or not, but there's too much evidence and proof that we can see way too far, and that's a good example of that. Okay, so the next one that I wanted to cover is the pictures of Earth. which, again, that was one of my big red pill moments, was going into just Google and just searching for pictures of Earth. And you're going to find there aren't any pictures of Earth. There's only images. These are typically photoshopped. These are, CGI, and they're usually created with artists, graphic artists, and different types of artists. And we can also look back at older pictures and see how they compare and contrast. We can also see a lot of discrepancies from what are supposed to be official photos of Earth. There's myriad official photos of Earth, and if you look at the ball size is the same, but the continent of the United States is different in massively different ways. The colors, the size, and you see a lot of photoshopped evidence of clouds, copied and pasted clouds, words in the clouds, things like that clearly point to manufactured images. So let's take a look at the Pictures of Earth video.
And what about all of the pictures of the Earth?
They are all clearly computer-generated images. They claim this picture from Apollo 17 in 1972 is real, and they also claim that the 2015 Epic Earth picture is real. But NASA employee Robert Simon gave us a glimpse of how they do it when he shared his experience of creating the Blue Marble 2.0 in 2002. He is now called Mr. Blue Marble. He was interviewed and on record stating, "The last time anyone took a photograph from above low Earth orbit that showed an entire hemisphere, one side of the globe, was in 1972 during Apollo 17. NASA's Earth Observing System, EOS, satellites were designed to give a checkup of Earth's health. By 2002, we finally had enough data to make a snapshot of the entire Earth, so we did."
In 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Why are all the other planets round then?
When you compare amateur footage done with professional grade cameras and compare it to NASA's official images of planets and stars, it's clear that NASA images are all computer generated, no different than the photos of Earth. What have become known as planets are round lights that seem to be set over the flat Earth. The so-called planets and stars are not what we have been told they are, and comparing luminous objects that you see in the sky to the Earth under your feet is very ineffective for actually proving the supposed rotundity of the Earth. Since there are no actual photographs of the Earth, and motion has never been experienced or proven, it would seem more logical for one to assume that we are on a flat, motionless plane, and everything we see in the heavens revolves around us.
All right, that's a good video there. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. Why can't I see Mount Everest? Some of these videos might be a little longer, so bear with me as I potentially skip through some material and maybe skip some of these. Let's see how far we get.
Globe earthers often ask, if the Earth is flat, then why can't people from anywhere in the world zoom with a telescope and see Mount Everest? To begin with, this question presupposes the errant assumption that we can see indefinitely far with the use of a telescope. This idea has been indoctrinated into people due to modern astronomers claiming that the stars and planets shown through their telescopes are millions and billions and trillions of miles away, making many people assume that a telescope pointed horizontally should also be able to see equally far, or at least as far as Mount Everest. In reality, however, as you can test for yourself, using a telescope or camera with just 100 or 200 times zoom capability, the stars and planets are not nearly that far away, and can be zoomed into incredible detail beyond what would be possible of something so absurdly distant. Furthermore, when looking horizontally across the Earth, there are a number of visibility and atmospheric limitations present that don't factor when looking upwards towards the stars, namely perspective and convergence, angular resolution and the vanishing point, as well as pollution, haze, humidity, fog, mist, and more. Most people asking about seeing Mount Everest through a telescope have never actually experimented with one themselves, or else would already know that visibility gets progressively more distorted the further you zoom, until nothing can be discernibly resolved. There are also, of course, hills, mountains, buildings, trees, and innumerable other objects in the way, obstructing any possible view to Mount Everest. If you stand on the beach, a plain or prairie, you will find the horizon extends about 3 to 6 miles around you, depending on the weather and your eyesight.
I'll go ahead and stop it there. I think you guys get the point of that perspective one. And the fact that when we have a medium like the atmosphere, and depending where you live and what time of year, and are you close to a city, and do they control their emissions in any way, you're going to have a lot of soot and dust and particles and different things in the air. Here in California, it's usually pretty clear, but there has been a lot of spraying in the air from airplanes, and it just changes the look and feel. And when it's clear, it's really clear. You can see very far. But you can't see forever, and clearly light doesn't travel forever. We saw that from the sunset footage. And also, I think what was also interesting in that video is some of the star footage. I have some better videos of stars. You can go to the star playlist, but just seeing how these stars with amateur high quality cameras and optics are kind of like these light pulsating things. And according to First Enoch, we have an ocean or a sea above us. And so maybe we're looking at objects through very clean water that sometimes shimmers. Maybe these are, light beings of some kind that are out there in terms of stars and just energy pulsing, which is really beautiful. And the planets have kind of similar, some of the planets have kind of similar effects. Let's look at the southern flights.
So we think that this distance is much longer for several reasons. There's no undersea cables here. There's no cruises that go direct. There's no, the Vendée Globe race where they go around Antarctica is ridiculous when you find out how fast they're going. The top speed in 24 hours of a boat is 200 miles per hour more in the north than in the south, which makes 0 sense on a globe. There's no reason why a boat would be able to go 200 miles more in a day than a boat in the south, unless the south is bigger than we're taught. So if I go QFA, there we go. Good. I'm glad this saves my searches. So QF27 is the Qantas flight that goes Sydney to Santiago. Okay, so we're going to bring that up real quick. We're going to look and see that it does about 12 and a half hours each time it goes. We're going to hit play on this one. Okay, so this is going this way. You'll see it breaks off of coverage, doesn't get coverage where it's like blacked out. And we used to be able to see these numbers here. We can't see them anymore. Okay, so we can't get our GPS altitude or our true airspeed. Even if you buy a package, which is supposed to unlock all these, it won't unlock for the southern flights. We've tried it. Bob paid for it. Didn't work. Okay, so once you see that this plane gets up to speed, it's going about, here we go, 641. So it's averaging maybe 600 through the trip. About 600, okay? And it goes 7,000 miles in 12 and a half hours. So if we bring up the calculator on that, let's just look at what that means. So if it's going 7,000 miles divided by 12.5 hours, we get 560. Okay, so that plane has to go 560 to make that trip. Now, here's the problem with that, is we've all shown before, and people will all admit this, I don't know who's arguing with this. If you go to Bob Wins, which is the AE map, which you can get your wind on. Now, we're only told a very, very small section of it, but let's go there. Let's go to 250, which is about 30,000 or like 26,000 feet. And you'll notice we get these crazy whipping winds. They go from, can't see where the continents are. Okay, so this is Australia here. So you can see that this plane could just get in these wind and get right to here. Now, how fast are these winds going? Okay, that's 152 miles per hour right there. Now, these could be going faster higher up. In fact, if we go, sometimes we can go right here, we can actually take it up. 70 HPA, though, is like 45,000 feet. So it actually gets above where we think most planes are flying. But in here, you can get, here's 127, 114. And again, how do we know these are true? We don't know. Pretty positive that there's winds in the south that move around. And again, if it's a globe, what is going on here? Why would there be ripping winds like crazy outside here in the south, but nothing in the north? It doesn't even make sense, and this is why they got rid of this map. If you don't know, this used to be on a website called earth.nullschool, and they got rid of it because too many people were seeing that everything jives on this flat earth map, and it doesn't make a lot of sense if we instead look at the globe, then it just gets all really ugly real globe. Okay, this makes no sense to anybody. Why would you have no winds here, nothing even blowing at all, but then down here you have these ripping winds going around Antarctica? Doesn't make any sense. It does make sense when you look at the flat earth. So here's 250. Look at this on a globe. Pretty funny. Does those winds look like they make sense to you? Or let's change it to the azimuthal equidistant, and all of a sudden they make a little bit more sense. They're all going in one direction, and you've got the sun and moon that travel in here. Okay? So it makes a lot more sense. Anyway, here's the problem. If these things are moving fast, like 174, here's what you have to believe. Let's go back here. We just did the math on this, and we figured out that that plane needs to go 560 to do that distance in that time, 7,000 miles in 12 and a half hours. Well, here's the problem with that. We just found out that there is 150 mile per hour winds, and that supposedly that goes up to like 250 or 300. But let's just take the 150, for example. If it's going 150 miles per hour, it's getting helped, then that plane is actually going 560 minus 150 or 410. Now you tell me, because everybody who thinks this is a globe proof, it's actually a globe killer. There is no plane for no reason flying 410 miles per hour and just like, yeah, we'll take the extra 150. We're just going to go 550 and just cruise. No, you're not. Any plane is going to take advantage of the winds, meaning that if it's actually going, it actually should be going 560 plus 150. So it should be doing 710. Now, again, a lot of people will get real upset. They'll be, but that's faster than the speed of sound. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. A plane can go faster than the speed of sound. Nobody in the cockpit would hear it. Nobody in the plane would know it. Nobody would even know. Okay? Now, I almost missed the point there. Also, when you have tailwind, you're not breaking the sound. The wind is taking the entire plane. Remember, breaking the speed of sound means the plane has to be going through the air faster than whatever it is, 670 miles per hour, whatever. But if there's wind carrying the plane, then the plane is not breaking the speed of sound. And we can actually look up at, if you look at plane breaks speed record, There was a plane recently out of the north, I think. So I mean, here, how a British Airlines once flew 825. So when you realize that the Dreamliner 747 ER. So the 747-9 is one that's done with composite materials across the entire plane. It's made for higher temperatures. It's made for higher speed. Now, again, people are like, but that doesn't mean it can go supersonic. No, but it's made special for some reason. And that's, of course, the plane that flies. And let's see if that's correct. If we go here, Qantas, and we see what plane is flying. It is where do you see the plane? Oh, right, 787-9. There. So it's on the 787-9 Dreamliner, which is what they all take. And it's a special plane. It's made for a special reason. So again, you can think what you want. I'll think what I want. I can come to my own conclusions. All the evidence is out there for us. The things go in a circle. There's no undersea cables. There's no cruises in the south. It's like no man's land down there. We lost MH370 in the south. You start going through all these things and it leads you to the conclusion that, you know what? All this makes sense on a flat earth that has a larger south. That's why there's no planes that really go on these long distance trips in the south. There's that one. But again, if they put the correct kind of plane on it, even the pilots don't need to know. Everything is done through flight software. If you tell the plane, hey, here's your takeoff, you need to get there at a certain time, the plane knows how fast to go. The plane knows what flight level to go to get the best wins. That's no.
Okay, I think I'm going to pause there. There's still another, several minutes left, but you get a good sense of the kind of dialogue that's possible when you go through and start researching flights, especially in the South, where according to the azimuthally equidistant model, which is the, circle of Earth surrounded by firmament, you're dealing with much greater distances between the areas of land that when you look on a Google Earth kind of thing, it's much tighter down there. Obviously, Antarctica being just one solid landmass that's relatively small, I think 13,000 miles around. But if you go back and research, Captain Cook was a explorer who went and did 3 expeditions over, I think, a couple of years. And he charted about 60,000 nautical miles of actual travel to circumnavigate the Antarctic landmass, which clearly in the model that we showed you is really just going around a big circle. So if everything is more spread out there, there could be potentially other land. There's certainly more distance. Clearly GPS, there's something up there. There seems to be some weather data that indicates that we have very strong winds, and this correlates well with the book of First Enoch, which said that there's 4 corners and there's 4 portals of winds. Actually, there's 12, 4 areas where 3 portals are injecting very fast air movement with different qualities that dictate the weather patterns of the world. And when you look at it on a globe, where it's superimposed data on a globe, it looks all messed up. It's kind of like warped and it doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you look at it on what we're saying is a correct map of the world is the AE map, then it actually looks like circles. And in fact, I've seen video footage where the winds seem to inject at those 4 locations. There's like a jet, like when you're in the swimming pool, you feel a jet on your back, right? Or a jacuzzi tub, right? It's like that. There's some kind of a portal where there's air coming in. And in fact, let me go ahead and look at, I'm going to skip ahead just for a minute and look at this atmosphere travels faster. Now, there's a couple of really good videos in here about the firmament, planes flying lower in the atmosphere. Let's do the atmosphere one first. This is from a really great ministry, the FEB, which I think is Foundation Earth Brothers, if I'm not mistaken. And what we're looking at here are some short clips that I think are on that are on TikTok that we can just take a quick look at. But these guys are doing phenomenal work. And actually, there's a creation standard class that's being developed for young people to understand and learn about the truth of creation, the way we can actually scientifically test it and prove it to ourselves. So I think that's really great work, and it's obviously biblically oriented and inspired.
I was taught that our pressurized air next to a vacuum was keeping up with the rotation of the Earth as it flies around the sun and through the galaxy. And so I wanted to see how it was our atmosphere does that. And of course, They tell us that our atmosphere is rotating along with the Earth thanks to the help of gravity. And so gravity is that centripetal force pulling on our air, holding it to the ball as it rotates and spirals through space. And if this is the case, our atmosphere would all have to be uniformly traveling around the ball at about the same speed, but when you look at what's going on with our upper atmosphere, this isn't the case. We have jet streams that are 5 to 9 miles high, going at about 150 miles per hour. And they are actually rotating the same direction the Earth is rotating. So they are winning the race against what they're keeping up with. And if that's not bad enough, when we look at the winds at ground level, they aren't even traveling the same directions. In North America, the wind is blowing from west to east, and when you start heading south, you have winds that are now going the opposite direction. But don't worry, as you keep going south, eventually they change directions again. And when you look at Asia, that map usually is missing arrows, so I had to add them. The winds are going south in the winter and north in the summer. They change directions. They are not keeping up with the globe like we are told. But what about the Coriolis effect, you say? Don't we have hurricanes in the northern hemisphere going counterclockwise and clockwise in the southern hemisphere? But look at this. Water currents just beneath them, they are going the opposite direction, clockwise in the north and counterclockwise in the south. And if that isn't bad enough, we have cells where wind is literally spiraling clockwise at the top, counterclockwise as you go down, clockwise even further down, counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclockwise, all over the place. The wind cannot make up its mind as to which direction it needs to go to keep up with the Earth, but somehow it's stuck to it, going all these different directions. And when you find out that the world has no answers for these anomalies, you go to the Word and you find answers. For example, the book of Enoch tells us that there are portals in the firmament of heaven, and they are blowing from the ends of the earth, high winds. And that is what we see happening in reality when we go to Antarctica. That's where we have the fastest winds blowing across the earth. Not only that, those hurricanes that we were looking at, they have a specific pattern. They are more evident in the north, meaning they cannot go back towards these powerful winds that are blowing from the outer ends of the world. And the closest we've ever seen go to the North Pole is about 600 miles, and the closest they've ever come to reaching the South Pole is far further, 4,330 miles, because the North is not like the South. That's why the angels have to go to the four corners of the earth in Revelation to hold the winds. Our Bible is telling the truth.
Yeah, that's just beautiful. Everything's reinforcing as you learn more, everything just makes so much more sense. The science, the math, the physics, how creation actually works, and of course, scripture. And it all comes together in scripture, guys. I'm telling you, stick with me. I will prove it to you. I will teach you. There's a lot of information here, but as we go forward, I will show you how it all works. I took these snapshots today out of the app that I told you about, the Zodiac Clock app, and what you'll notice is, of course, this is data that looks like circles, and you can see kind of some inlets here at the four areas. I'm not sure exactly where the four areas are in that particular photo, and you'll see today's date. It's again June 29th, and you'll see you can actually look at this data at different levels or height, and you'll see faster or slower winds depending on where you are. I believe this is partly why, pilots look for that sweet spot and try to get into the jet stream where they can find the best wind going in a particular direction. And that could be a tailwind, obviously going to the easterly direction, and it can be a headwind reduction going in the opposite direction. For obvious reasons. So you want to make good time, use less gas, etc. The other thing that I think is really important to consider is that when you have a round spinning globe that's moving in this general direction, kind of picture like the air on top of it spinning away. Like if you took a ball, let's say you took a tennis ball and it got in a puddle of water and you wanted to get the water off, you'd spin it in the air and you see it flick everything out. Centrifugal force, flying moisture everywhere, right? When it's spinning, what happens is the moisture comes off of it, but the ball is spinning faster than the moisture. The ball is rotating, the water's coming off it and falling away. Now, if you're the Earth and you're actually, if we consider the heliocentric model for a second as a thought experiment to be true, and the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour at that equator, and obviously slower speeds up north, you would picture the atmosphere moving away from the Earth slower. It would fall away and move slower the further you go up because you have less and less gravitational pull to keep the atmosphere intact. But what actually happens in reality is that the wind chases the Earth faster than the rotation of the Earth. Okay, I want you to think about that. I know it's a little tough to picture, to visualize that, but the wind is actually moving faster than the speed and rotation of the Earth in that model. That is absolutely impossible. So there's no way that that's happening. Yet another example of the globe just falling apart as far as the model is concerned. Let's take a look at firmament footage. I really love this is another FEB video, and we'll look at the planes fly lower in Antarctica one as well to kind of give you a sense of the firmament is it's a real barrier. We can't go past it. It varies in height depending on, again, where you are in terms of the overall picture here, but we know that there is a firmament, and here's some examples of high altitude weather video footage that was caught and probably removed from the official websites, at least.
If you don't believe in the firmament, there's proof of that barrier, video footage. And what you're seeing, I just want to break down for anyone who by chance is here and has no clue what we're talking about. We're talking about lightning sprites. This phenomenon is very mysterious for a reason. It wasn't captured on photo until about the 1980s. But these things occur at heights above 60 miles. And these things are massive, almost 60 miles wide. They make Mount Everest look like a giant stone. These things are huge and powerful, billions of volts of electricity. And when we look at what these things are, they are considered large electrical discharges made up of plasma. How does this prove there's a barrier up above us? Because we can replicate it in the lab with an invention made by Nikola Tesla known as the plasma ball. This thing can replicate lightning sprites brilliantly. And where it comes into proving that there's a barrier up above us is when you try to do this without the barrier. If you remove this barrier, it's not going to work. That's why you see waves moving across this barrier before these things shoot out. When you flip it upside down, it looks like waves in the ocean. And they haven't just been captured on video by NOVA, they've been captured by astronomers. There are people who go out time and time again and film things that should not happen on the globe, but you can see it for yourself. It's there. This necessitates a barrier. This doesn't happen in deep space. A vacuum chamber is not going to have random waves moving in front of luminaries like that. And if you don't,
Yeah, that's some really interesting video footage, obviously, for a variety of reasons. I used to obviously go, to some of the science museums, and you always see those balls, and you touch the balls, and you might feel a little tingle, maybe a little heat, but it's really cool to see how you're kind of closing the circuit and allowing that voltage to go across from the barrier. And the other thing, that I think was really interesting there was just looking at.
Don't believe in the
let's see where it
firmament,
was
there's
here.
proof of that barrier. Astronomers.
Yeah, right here you can actually see what looks like a moon wave. Okay, and this is I've seen a number of different videos showing some kind of a wave pattern that just manifests on very high zoomed in, high quality images of the moon itself. And so whoever's catching those images at just the right time, I don't know what's causing a wave to occur. But if you consider Enoch, it is talking about in some of the other apocryphal texts talk about a sea. Even in the canon, it talks about a sea that's hanging above, and that in the book of Revelation, there's no more sea when the new heaven and the new earth are crafted, and we can get into that in a deeper dive. But the idea that there's an ocean above us and that the flood in part was due to these sluices opening and this water coming down, perhaps that water above us is very flat, and perhaps it's very calm in that particular layer of the firmament. So maybe there's something dropping into the water that's causing a ripple effect, like in a swimming pool. So that's a theory, not really sure, but we definitely can see these strange optical anomalies of moon waves up above the firmament. Let's take a look at the planes flying lower in Antarctica video.
If there were a firmament that was getting lower to the ground as you went south beyond the Antarctic shoreline, planes would have to fly lower. That is something that would just make sense on the biblical Earth model. And when you look into what actually happens in Antarctica, you find out that, wait a minute, planes do actually fly lower. How much lower? Well, a lot lower. When you look at their elevation, it's around 11,000 feet in the Antarctic region. When you go to the Arctic, it should be exactly the same because they say we live on a globe and the South and the North are exactly the same. However, they're flying at 29,000 feet, far higher because they don't have to worry about a barrier. And it's not some barrier we're making up. There is footage of this barrier. We've shared it before. There are declassified documents that speak of it. The Encyclopedia Britannica talks about a dome-like structure being around 13,000 feet beyond the 80th south parallel. I used to think there could be another explanation for that. However, there might be some truth to those numbers given that they're flying that low in Antarctica. What do you?
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned earlier and forgot to just follow up on is the rainbows that are filmed in places like the North tend to be these kind of bigger, broader bows, and then in the South they tend to be much thinner and lower to the ground. So these could all be proofs of a lower barrier, lower ceiling height when you get out into the Antarctic area. You can go to Antarctica if you have a very expensive very scripted tour that takes you to a very specific place and you take some photos and come back. You can't go and explore freely in Antarctica, and it is heavily militarized. So the whole world's the countries that formed the treaty back in I think it was the late 50s, came together and basically said anyone going past the 60th degree parallel, they're going to be intercepted and taken away from that area. You're not allowed to go and explore on your own. Okay, let's move on from this topic and go into we have a satellites video. Let's see how long that one is. Maybe just look at it for a few minutes.
The number one food for regular BMs, huh? Okay, let's see.
Of course, we have to have the occasional video.
Now, it's not that a space company exposes another space company's lies. But today, we're going to be looking at how the SpaceX satellite train completely debunks the notion of an ISS that is orbiting a ridiculous 17,500 miles around a spinning ball Earth. Now, this ISS is reportedly slightly larger than a football field. Have you ever seen the ISS physically being built? I haven't. So how do we know it even exists? Well, it doesn't. And today we're going to be looking at that. Now, I find it interesting when you compare two objects in the sky that are basically two different altitudes and significantly different in sizes, that we should be able to then observe that in our skies. The satellites are the first of a planned 12,000 satellite mega constellation. Now, I'm not sure if that's a sly way of them wanting to make artificial constellations that we see in the sky, but they've already received a number of complaints from astronomers and people alike. Now they want this 12,000 satellites to provide internet access to the people on Earth, which is probably the most stupidest idea anyway. I mean, I don't understand how anyone would want to spend that sort of money putting these satellites into the sky when 5G is literally killing the market. Pun intended. Now, they supposedly launched 60 Starlink satellites into the atmosphere at a ridiculous altitude of 440 kilometers. Now, this footage was taken in the Netherlands of the satellite train. So pay attention to the size of the light that you see on each satellite. And keep in mind that the size of these satellites are reported to be the size of an office desk. Now, these satellites also appear to...
I might pause this just for a second. When you think about the height and the time of day and the size of what we're told is a satellite, first of all, let's call it 300 miles up. That's a really far away place. Like if you took a desk and moved it a mile away, could you see the desk? Okay, what about 10 miles? How about 50? How about 150? How about double that to 300? Would you see a desk at 300 miles away? The answer is, of course, you would not see a desk at 300 miles away. You wouldn't see a bus at 300 miles away. You probably wouldn't see a plane at 300 miles away. And you probably wouldn't see, I don't know, something much bigger. The other problem that you have with this idea that you have this incredibly lit up satellite moving across the sky, which, by the way, I've seen the Starlink satellites moving across the sky in California. One night they just were kind of dancing through the sky. They were moving at a pretty good clip across, across the dark night sky. It was a clear night, um, and there's no sunlight reflecting off of a desk that's 300 miles up over the Earth. It really doesn't take much math, and you can look at Google Maps and you can kind of see something floating over the middle of the dark night is not high enough to reflect sunlight if the sun were 93 million miles away, which we're saying it's not. The point is it's not reflecting sunlight, and if it were, you wouldn't see it anyway. It's not reflecting sunlight. It's not high enough to reflect sunlight, and it's not large enough to see. So therefore, it cannot be a satellite the way we're told. It must be something else. To me, it almost looked like they were kind of floating across the sky. I would think that they are high altitude planes, most likely with some very bright LEDs that are shining down, and that they plan these trips of planes to go overhead at various times and say, look, there's the Starlink satellites.
They say that they've got a solar wing, which is being depicted here by CGI. Now, we know how space companies are quite renowned for their CGI images. They love painting that little pretty picture of what space would be like, so you're going to have to use your imagination for the rest. Now, let's see what SpaceX CEO has to say about the solar arrays during the initial orbit. Following the chorus of concerns, SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk responded the satellite solar arrays had not yet been pointed at the sun. The solar arrays were not yet pointed at the sun when this footage was being captured. These office-sized desk satellites were apparently initially orbiting at 440 kilometers altitude.
Right. So I'm just going to fast forward through here, see if there's anything else of interest. Let's take a look here.
Not yet being pointed at the sun, as Elon said, it's safe to assume the bottom of the quote-unquote satellites are facing the Earth. Now, I highly doubt that each satellite was equipped with enough LEDs attached to the bottom of them to make them illuminate brighter than the ISS. My thought is that these are just there to be a spectacle for everyone to see on the initial orbit, and for people to take photos and videos, to prove that there actually are satellites orbiting a spinning ball Earth, again, which is completely nonsensical. Now, remember, guys,
I think we're good on this video. You guys can go ahead and check it out. I've linked to these. And you can spend more time looking into satellites. There's quite a lot of videos on that topic, and there's I pointed this out yesterday, but there are a lot of helium balloons that are being used to carry what I would call satellites that I think people are in fact working on communication systems that are high altitude. Let's call it 100,000, 120,000 feet, which really, if you divide that by 5280 per mile, you're dealing with like a 25 mile-ish up kind of thing. Probably can't even see that. And it's way lower than a 300-foot high, 17,000 mile an hour supposed desk chair that is, floating around with giant LEDs on it. So I don't think that's happening. I think we have two different things happening. We have balloons carrying communication systems that can be interfaced with and probably are launched from Antarctica. Don't know how they're directed or controlled, or if they're just following jet streams, and then at some point they run out of helium, or maybe they're remotely controlled somewhere else to land. The other is there seems to be these orchestrated plane trains that have LEDs on them, and they're moving at a pretty good clip, but they're not making any sound. So that one I haven't really figured out exactly what that is, but we know it's not a desk with reflective sunlight. Let's take a look at this fun little clip. This is a short one, and it's only 7 seconds, but it's Elon Musk talking about his space Tesla. It's always a good one just to keep in mind, who's telling the truth and who's not.
Still looking for a new job?
Just found out my dad's sister's husband is golfing buddies with the CEO of a great company. So basically...
And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.
Okay, he said, you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. Let's take a look at the CGI image of a Tesla in outer space. And you see Elon grinning and everyone laughs, and it's very cute. It really doesn't look at all real. Who took the photo? Is that sticking off a boom? Is it like a selfie stick? Is that a space alien? These are CGI, guys. This is not real. Let's get real. Okay, speaking of the situation with the Tesla founder launching things into space, and there's a lot of CGI and a lot of camera angle changes. Go watch all the playlists on that topic. What I really wanted to show you is the uncut moon landing footage. Now, this is a big one because I had not seen this footage in full until I watched it when I saw this particular video come out. So let's go ahead and take a look at it and see what we can see there.
A flat fact. A flat fact. The realm. Do you know what the realm is? A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to have a look at the footage broadcast to the public live around the world on television of the last minutes to the landing on the moon. The footage was not filmed by NASA, not created by Stanley Kubrick, and it also wasn't done by Disney. Throughout history, suspicions of fraud or conspiracy have surfaced in various fields, including archaeology, history, medicine, science, and the media. Over time, compelling evidence has emerged to vindicate these doubts. The motive behind these deceptions vary widely. Mostly it's about money. In the pursuit of personal gain, the ethics of the few have tarnished the ethics of the many. For over 6 decades, a significant portion of the public has questioned the authenticity of what has been hailed as humanity's greatest achievement. Uncut footage sheds new light on these long-standing suspicions. In the lead up to what was billed as the most historic event of all time, set to be broadcast live on the telly, the year was 1969, and televisions were not a common sight in most households. Many families rushed to acquire a television to witness the moon landing unfold in real time. While a handful of American households boasted colour television, the majority of the world tuned in on their trusty black and white screens. Families came together in anticipation. Those without television gathered outside shops. All were in awe to see the live broadcast of man landing on the moon. It is no wonder that so many firmly believe they witnessed humanity's giant leap. After all, they saw it happen live on the telly. On May 17th, 2000, astronaut Buzz Aldrin appeared on the late night show with Conan O'Brien. Let's listen to what he said.
Well, let's talk about...
I don't know, has anyone seen that show, Conan O'Brien with Buzz Aldrin? Might be interesting to hear from you if you had seen that show, but listen carefully to how Buzz answers the question or responds to Conan's comment.
About this, because this is fascinating. I remember very clearly, I think anybody who was alive at the time does. I remember my parents waking me up and we went down and we watched you guys land on the moon.
No,
which
you
was
didn't. No, you didn't.
What?
Because there wasn't any television. There wasn't anybody taking a picture. You watched animation. See, you associated what you saw with...
I have very hazy memories.
Yeah, I know.
Conan's laughing it off, but he just said the truth there. So sometimes you'll hear a truthful statement. You did not watch what you thought you watched an animation. Let's keep going.
Buzz does not finish the sentence. Buzz tells Conan that he didn't see the guys land on the moon, that it was an animation. The moon landing was broadcast as a live event, etching itself into the collective memory. However, in this 2000 TV appearance, astronaut Buzz Aldrin contradicts this narrative. When Conan O'Brien recalled watching the landing with his parents, Aldrin interjected, stating, "No, you didn't. You watched an animation. You associated what you saw with." He said, "You associated what you saw with." This surprising remark shifted responsibility to the viewers, implying a misunderstanding.
That's a really good point. Whenever we're being deceived, it's my theory or hypothesis based on evidence that I've seen over the last several years that we're told what is happening beforehand, and it's not their fault if we're not smart enough to figure it out.
Conan and his family associated the footage with the live broadcast because that is what the world was told. On July 20th, 2019, marking the 50th anniversary of the United States moon landing, the official NASA YouTube channel treated viewers to a live stream of the final 29 minutes of the original footage. What made this occasion appear even more special is that the footage was presented in vivid color. In the video's description, it reads, "Join us for a trip down memory lane, starting at 4:02 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on July the 20th, 2019, NASA TV replayed the original footage of the 1969 moon landing. Relive the moment." It might appear that NASA TV played the complete original footage, but that was not the case. They omitted a portion at the end. So either NASA TV doesn't have the uncut version, or they deliberately edited that bit out. Now let's look at the footage in question, the uncut version, the version which clearly labels itself as animation and labels at the creators of that animation. Even one of the presenters acknowledged it. Along with this, it is the late 1960s, a time when animations were painstakingly hand-drawn and hand-inked. For comparison, a Disney feature film of that era took around 3 to 5 years to complete. While the moon landing animation wasn't a Disney creation, it likely required a similar time frame for preparation and production. Understand, this footage was a few years in the making. I'm now going to play the last uncut 6 minutes of footage, and we will see who is responsible. And then I'll be back. Let's go.
Altitude now 21,000 feet, still looking very good.
This is the International Arrivals Building, Kennedy Airport, with a big display board there.
Velocity down now to 1,200 feet per second. You're looking great,
Disneyland in California.
Okay, I'm still on flu, so we may tend to lose as we gradually tick over. Let me try auto again now, see what happens. Roger.
We started about the high.
What do you guys notice about this video footage so far? Anything jump out at you as strange or different or odd? You've seen video footage of the Tesla founders' recent launches. What's different?
Again in 10.
Okay, looks like it's home. Roger, we got good data.
Makes the job easier. They're down to just 14 miles to go in 4.5 minutes.
7 minutes, 30 seconds into the burn.
4.5 minutes.
The state of the art of technology in 1969 with animation and everything else that they had is on full display here. A lot of work went into this. In the 80s, I played a video game called Moon Patrol. It was kind of similar graphics.
Minutes left in this era.
Altitude 16,300 feet.
Oh boy. Just great the way the communication is working.
I'm going to fast forward some parts here to get closer to what we're trying to look at.
Descent to fuel to monitor, over. 42. 2,000 feet, 2,000 feet, into the ag, 47 degrees, roger.
And if you guys watch these descents in the modern era, if you watch, the Chinese landing or India or other space agencies, there's a lot of CGI and there's a lot of this kind of run up. It's very similar to watching this.
37 degrees. 150 feet down at 4. 160 feet, 6.5 down, 5.5.
I don't think I have to question this this video footage. Clearly, whoever's filming this is an alien. How else would they have gotten this footage? This is the first time we're getting to the moon. Who's filming?
9 forward. Good. 20 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. How many bites? 75 feet.
Did you guys see that word? Watch that one more time.
3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. How many bites? 75 feet. Car's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds.
Did you see the sparks flying off that surface?
Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. Good. 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drifting to the right a little. 20, down a half. 30 seconds forward, just. Good. Ready?
That's who did it. CBS News. It's a simulation.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Power control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm on.
We're home.
413 is in.
Man on the moon.
We copy you down, Eagle. Houston,
Oh, jeez.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Ooh. Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're coming to.
All right, so all the pomp and circumstance aside and the acting from our anchors here, everyone who was alive back then thought this was real. I talked to an atheist recently who I showed this to, and he said, yeah, of course it was an animation. Everyone knew that. Let's move on. So that was the uncut moon landing footage. We can then look at the Putin video here. And this is one of the Greg Reese ones that is well done. Let's just watch Greg for 5 more minutes, and I think we'll close out after that.
Using the right weight matters. The body pod lets you easily understand what is the fastest way.
Former head of Russia's space agency says that the Apollo moon landings were fake. And in a recent video going around, Vladimir Putin is briefed that several moon landing images are considered to be fake by artificial intelligence.
То есть почти все объекты на этом фото ей кажутся не настоящими. В то же время вот фотография китайского лунохода у нее особенных вопросов не вызывает. А это то, что кажется не настоящим? Да.
There's a great deal of human intelligence who do not believe that the Apollo moon missions were authentic. And here are some of the reasons why. NASA was run by former Nazi Werner von Braun, who was beholden to the US government for secretly importing him into the country via Project Paperclip, as were the dozens of other Nazis who joined him to work as rocket scientists, all of them with a good reason to keep a secret. And the overwhelming majority of astronauts were Freemasons and the sons of Freemasons. Freemasons swear on their lives to keep the secrets they are entrusted with. Why on earth would anyone trust NASA? If the moon landing was real, it would have been a miraculous achievement because NASA was failing at every level of the mission and did not believe they would be able to achieve their goal. In 1967, Government Inspector Thomas Barron testified before congressional investigators that the Apollo program was failing. 6 days after his testimony, he was killed with his wife and child when a train crashed into his car. Astronaut Gus Grissom held an unauthorized press conference where he criticized the program and said it would take another 10 years to fly to the moon. 5 days later, he was killed on the job. Gus Grissom's last words were, "How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings?"
Hey, how are we gonna get to the moon if we can't talk between 3 buildings? I can't hear a thing you're saying. Jesus Christ. But how are we gonna get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings?
Moments later, the Apollo 1 command module caught fire, killing astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee. Several key members of the Apollo mission resigned just months before the mission. What NASA had been successful at was a massive marketing operation that put space travel into the zeitgeist of American pop culture. And they had spent billions creating multiple sound stages with realistic models of the moon to begin producing simulations of the moon landing. NASA had several problems to solve. Problems with communications, the rockets, and the lunar module. But one of their biggest obstacles was deadly radiation. In order to reach the moon, one has to pass through what is known as the Van Allen radiation belt. And NASA announced in 2014 that this was still a problem when they launched an unmanned spacecraft to try to solve it.
Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Aside from the Apollo moon missions, no one has ever gone past the Van Allen radiation belt. The Apollo moon mission had no protection against the radiation, and astronauts don't even seem to know about it.
Any ill effects from the Van Allen radiation belts?
No. Now, I'm not sure we went far enough out to encounter the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe we did.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
Then we went right out through them.
According to NASA, we can go no higher than low Earth orbit.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to.
In the documentary film, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. The 3 astronauts of Apollo 11 are seen in low Earth orbit, figuring out how to stage a fake image for the camera. This film was recorded when the Apollo 11 was said to be nearing lunar orbit, and we can see and hear them manipulating the shot to make the Earth appear to be thousands of miles away, when in fact they have blacked out the inside of the craft and are blocking off the window facing the surface to make it look like the Earth at a distance. When we hear Houston radio approval for the shot, the astronauts do not respond until an unknown third party can be heard whispering, "Talk."
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
The astronauts are told they are being pre-recorded and edited for a subsequent live broadcast. Buzz Aldrin explains how they shut out the sun to achieve the illusion of the one window being the Earth in the black of space. And with direction from Houston, they get it to look right for the camera. We then hear the portion meant for the public, with Neil Armstrong claiming to be 130,000 miles from Earth and describing a single camera pressed up against the window to achieve the shot. But in the unedited footage, we see objects passing between the camera and the window. We see a work light in the dark. And finally, when they are done with their hoax, the final few frames reveal the truth. Protecting humans in this radiation wasn't the only problem. The high-end Hasselblad camera had no protection against radiation, and there is no explanation as to how it was able to take photographs in negative 200-degree weather with a constant bombardment of cosmic radiation.
Billion-dollar brands.
All right, so clearly a lot of things to unpack here as you go and examine some of this information. Greg Reese, again, just being a phenomenal reporter, but also researcher, and has really been able to just bring some amazing insights and paradigm-shifting concepts to the public. One of the questions clearly we need to be able to ask and answer is, if the Van Allen radiation belts are so dangerous and our technology currently cannot allow man to move past them, then how do we move past them? Anyone? I mean, that's clearly like the big one. So the fact that the astronauts weren't aware of them doesn't excuse the fact that if they're there. And then the other thought is just clearly, as we think about the biblical cosmology model with a firmament above our heads, we are in a contained system that we cannot get out of. So that would be another reason to think that there might be a barrier up there that we can't pass through. Maybe it's the firmament, not the Van Allen radiation belts. And we've shown a lot of proof of that today. So let's move to the last video I wanted to show you, is the Go Fast rocket launch in 2014. Now, before I show this, just a comment. When we have seen, obviously we're sending rockets up in the air. We have, intercontinental ballistic missiles. We have a number of space shuttle launches. People have, that I know, my own parents witnessed a space shuttle launch from Cape Canaveral. People who witness that experience amazing sights and what they experience, obviously, from the heat and the sound. I think at a 3-mile distance, massive thrust, and we do feel a sense of pride over all of that. What you'll notice in every single launch from the past footage is that the rockets tend to go very slowly as they lift off with the massive tonnage of material, and then they start to go up, and then they kind of turn, and then they go out and over, and it almost looks like they're just going kind of straight out over the water. And so we're told, no, that they're actually going up to intercept the orbit, right? They're so high and so fast and far that they're up there, intercepting the spin of the Earth, which we've already proven there is no spin of the Earth. What a real rocket looks like when it launches, I think a good sense of what it really looks like from the point of view of the rocket, this is a really cool video, is the Go Fast rocket launch in 2014. Then we'll talk about it afterwards. I'm going to move this forward a little bit because it does this for a while, about 75 seconds in, I think. We'll talk about how fast and how high it went. Also, we'll talk a little bit about, okay, so it looks like something either jettisoned off or it hit something. It's not really clear, but it looks like it starts to rotate here, and then starts to become, yeah, we lost that piece. I don't know what altitude we're at or what speed. I don't know if it hit something or if it just kind of stopped with a thrust. Maybe that was that sound. As we go here and rotate around, I want to point something out. That is the moon. I want you to think about what I'm saying. We've gone about 72 miles up, straight up, and that is the moon. You also notice, you might say, well, Paul, there's curvature there. You know, depending on the camera, we clearly have the fisheye lens effect with a lot of cameras out there. It is provably flat from a 120,000 foot elevation from certain balloon footage I've seen. And you know, this particular camera, you might actually go convex up, convex down, like it kind of does this. But what I want you to focus on is the fact that we see the moon from this point of launch. Looks like we're getting some sun glare in here and there as well, depending on the direction we're facing. But it does look pretty flat to me as well, obviously with that convex up and down kind of a setup. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Let me just see if there's any more footage of that moon portion. I think that was it. So right in that initial, as it's starting to rotate around right there, let's go back a few seconds. Right there, we see the moon. So let's now look at some data and some information from this particular launch. Okay, so the Go Fast rocket was launched from Black Rock Desert, which is in northwest Nevada, in 2014. While the exact time is not explicitly stated in the provided search results, it was likely launched in the early morning hours. According to Space Forum post, the screenshot from inthesky.org suggests the moon was visible at 7:32 a.m. local time in New Mexico. The Go Fast 2014 had flown successfully in 4 commercial space missions. The rocket reached an altitude of 72 miles or 116 kilometers during that 1 minute or so time. At the time of launch, the moon was in a waning gibbous phase. Its sublunar point, the point on Earth directly below the moon, was located near 9 degrees 52 south latitude and 172.55. I think that's arc degrees east longitude. This location corresponds to a landmass in the south central Pacific Ocean, likely in the vicinity of the island nations of Samoa or Tonga. The coordinates correspond to a location in the Pacific near the Phoenix Islands, which are part of the island of Kiribati. The exact point is just northeast of Rakawi Island, formerly known as Phoenix Island. So I took a screenshot of that for this post. I also wanted to show you the Google Earth view. Okay, so here is the Phoenix Islands. Okay, and we can zoom out a little bit and see how that looks from the Earth perspective. Okay, and then I want to show you where New Mexico is. So the launch occurred here in New Mexico, but the moon was actually seen all the way over here on the other side of the planet. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, let me go ahead and stop sharing. Let's go ahead and wrap up here. We've talked a lot, got to lower my hand. We've talked a lot about the reasons why the model fails for this heliocentric side. One of the biggest reasons is we can see too far. In fact, we really don't have to go any further than to say that for a sphere of size 24,901 miles in circumference, radius of 3,000 some odd, maybe it's closer to 4,000 miles, you have a Earth curve formula and you can Google it. We can look up the Earth curve formula and plug in coordinates and say, well, how far should we be able to see before there is a drop off in a bulge? And how much drop off should there be? That's the curvature drop off. So when you start looking at the other side of the planet, the bulge is the planet. If you can see the moon at a 72-mile height when it's on the other side of the planet, close to Australia, should be between you and the Earth. Or sorry, the Earth should be between you and the moon. So we absolutely should not be able to see the moon visible. Maybe you make a case it's not the moon, that's fine. The point I'm trying to make is there's way too many anomalies. I've just given you guys a small, tiny sliver, and hopefully you enjoyed going through the videos today. I wanted to make it kind of a fun second video because I'll be spending a lot more time, talking through some of the content that I've put forward yesterday, again in sections. But the videos for me really, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's really hard to go back once you see it to just believing in something that just doesn't have any scientific proof. Okay, I think that's all for me today. This is Saul DePaul signing off for Remnant Radio. I appreciate you. If you have made it through this entire video, I appreciate you sticking around. And if you have any thoughts or comments, obviously we'll open those up. Hope you take this in stride and take it. Hopefully this will help, especially for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, and for those of you who have been really just in unbelief in the past. I hope that this blesses you. I hope that in the same way it did to me, it opens up your heart and your eyes to the truth of God's real creation. Take care. God bless.